The early morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek, as Beatrice Turner stood in the doorway of what remained of her family's general store, ashes still smoldering from the fire that had consumed not only her livelihood, but the last vestige of the life she had built with her late husband. The year was 1879, and the Wyoming Territory showed little mercy for a woman alone. "Madam, you really shouldn't be in there," a voice called out, startling Beatrice from her daze. She turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light, the brim of his hat pulled low over his eyes. "Structure's not safe." Beatrice wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek, her voice hollow when she finally spoke. "It doesn't matter anymore, I have nothing." The stranger stepped closer, his features coming into focus, weathered but kind, eyes the color of the sky after a storm. "You have me," he said simply, extending a gloved hand. "Caleb Xavier, at your service." She didn't take his hand. "And what exactly am I supposed to do with that, Mr. Xavier? Can you rebuild my store, bring back my husband, restore 5 years of hard work reduced to cinders in a single night?" A faint smile touched his lips. "No, madam, but I can help you clear this mess and start again, if you'll let me." "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "I knew Thomas. Your husband saved my life once during a blizzard 3 winters back, never got to repay him." Caleb removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair. "Least I can do is help his widow." Beatrice studied him, recognition slowly dawning. "You're the drifter who collapsed outside town. Thomas brought you to our home." "Yes, madam, nursed me back to health for 2 weeks." "Good man, your husband." She nodded, grief a fresh wound despite the 2 years since Thomas's passing. "He was. Sheriff says the fire wasn't an accident." Caleb's voice hardened. "Thinks it might be the Blackwell gang. They've been causing trouble all through the territory." "What does it matter who did it? It's gone now." Beatrice kicked at a charred piece of wood. "Everything's gone. It matters because justice matters, Mrs. Turner, and because you need to decide what comes next." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "Next? There is no next. I can barely afford the room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house for another week." Caleb replaced his hat, adjusting it against the rising sun. "Everyone needs a next, Mrs. Turner, even when it seems impossible." He pulled a worn pocket watch from his vest. "I've got to see the sheriff, but I'll be back tomorrow morning. We can start clearing this out." "I didn't ask for your help." "No, madam, you didn't." He tipped his hat. "But you're getting it anyway." True to his word, Caleb appeared the next morning before the sun had fully risen, tools in hand and a wagon loaded with lumber. Beatrice, who had barely slept, found him already sorting through the rubble, separating salvageable items from debris. "You're wasting your time," she called out, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the morning chill. Caleb looked up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool air. "Good morning to you too, Mrs. Turner. Why are you really doing this? What do you want?" He paused his work, leaning on the shovel. "Not everything comes with conditions, madam. In my experience, Mr. Xavier, everything does. Then you've had poor experiences." He resumed digging through the charred remains. "Could use some coffee if you're offering, though." Despite herself, Beatrice returned 30 minutes later with 2 tin cups of coffee from the nearby cafe. She found Caleb had uncovered her husband's lockbox, miraculously intact. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing it to her without meeting her eyes, respecting her privacy. Beatrice took it with trembling hands. The key had been on a chain around her neck since Thomas died. "Thank you," she whispered, genuinely moved. Found some inventory ledgers too. Pages are singed, but most of the writing's still legible. They worked in silence until midday when Beatrice insisted on buying him lunch at the cafe. It was the least she could do. "How long have you been in Silver Creek?" she asked as they sat at a corner table, away from curious eyes. "Arrived yesterday. Was passing through on my way north when I saw the smoke." Caleb took a long drink of water. "Sheriff Donovan says you've had trouble with the Blackwell gang before." Beatrice stiffened. "Thomas refused to sell them supplies on credit. Their leader, Marcus Blackwell, threatened him." "But that was years ago, before Thomas caught pneumonia." Blackwell has a long memory, and now he's running guns through the territory. What does that have to do with my store? Caleb leaned forward. Rumor has it he's looking to establish a permanent base in these parts. Your building was one of the sturdiest in town, prime location too. So he burned it down. That makes no sense. It does if he wants to buy the land cheap once you're desperate enough to sell. Beatrice considered this. I won't sell, not to him. Good. Caleb nodded approvingly. But that means you need to rebuild, and quickly. With what money? I had everything invested in that store. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I've been saving, not much, but enough to get walls up and a roof overhead. Beatrice stared at him in disbelief. You'd give your savings to a stranger. I told you your husband saved my life. In my book, that makes us something more than strangers. Over the following days, a tentative partnership formed between them. Caleb's skills as a carpenter proved invaluable as they began rebuilding. Other townspeople, seeing his dedication, offered their help as well. Beatrice found herself supervising a small crew of volunteers, her natural leadership emerging from the ashes of her despair. One evening, as they sat on the partially constructed porch, sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Beatrice finally asked the question that had been bothering her. Why aren't you settling somewhere, Mr. Xavier? A man with your skills could build a good life. Caleb stared into the distance. Been moving since I was 16. Father was a drunk who used his fists more than his words. Left home, joined up with a cattle drive. Been working trails and odd jobs ever since. And now I'm helping a stubborn widow rebuild her store. He smiled, the expression softening his weather-beaten features. I'm not stubborn, Beatrice protested. Yes, madam, you are, and it's a good thing too. Not many would stand their ground against the likes of Blackwell. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of the town settling into evening. Beatrice found herself studying Caleb's profile in the fading light, noticing the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. You should call me Beatrice, she said suddenly. If we're going to be business partners, Caleb raised an eyebrow, is that what we are now? Well, you've invested your savings, seems only fair you get something in return. I didn't do it for a return, Mrs. Beatrice. I know. That's why I'm offering, she smiled, surprising herself with how natural it felt. Besides, I could use a partner who knows his way around a hammer. The rebuilding continued at a steady pace, and with it came a subtle shift in their relationship. Beatrice found herself looking forward to their early morning planning sessions, the way Caleb listened intently to her ideas, offering suggestions but never dismissing her opinions. He treated her as an equal, something rare in her experience. 3 weeks into construction, trouble arrived in the form of 3 riders. Beatrice was alone, reviewing supply deliveries when they approached. The lead rider, a man with a face like carved granite and cold eyes, dismounted. Mrs. Turner, places coming along nicely. Beatrice straightened, recognizing Marcus Blackwell from Thomas's descriptions. What do you want? Just being neighborly, heard about your misfortune. His smile never reached his eyes. I'm in the market for property in town, willing to make you a generous offer for this lot. It's not for sale. Blackwell glanced at his companions who remained mounted, hands resting too casually near their holstered weapons. Times are hard for a woman alone. Accidents happen. Might be wiser to take the money and start fresh somewhere else. Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwell? Just friendly advice. He mounted his horse. Think about it. My offer won't stand forever. As they rode away, Beatrice realized her hands were shaking. She was still standing there when Caleb returned with a wagon of supplies. Beatrice, what's wrong? He was by her side instantly, concern etched on his face. When she told him about the encounter, his expression darkened. We need to speak to Sheriff Donovan. This is the proof we needed that Blackwell was behind the fire. It proves nothing, Beatrice said. He was careful with his words. We both know what he meant. Caleb's hand moved unconsciously to the revolver at his hip. Violence won't solve this, Caleb, neither will ignoring it. he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I won't let him threaten you again. This isn't your fight." Caleb's gaze was steady when it met hers. "Yes, it is." That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep. The boarding house room felt suffocating, her thoughts circling endlessly between fear of Blackwell and confusion about her growing feelings for Caleb. Near dawn, she gave up and dressed, deciding an early start at the store site would at least be productive. She was surprised to find Caleb already there, keeping watch, a rifle across his knees. "Have you been here all night?" she asked, startling him from his vigilance. "Someone had to make sure our work wasn't accidentally destroyed." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "Besides, I've slept under worse conditions than a half-built porch." Impulsively, Beatrice reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Caleb's hand covered hers briefly before he turned away, clearing his throat. "Should get the roof trusses up today if the weather holds." The moment passed, but its effect lingered, creating a new awareness between them as they worked side by side. Beatrice found herself noticing the strength in his hands, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. For his part, Caleb seemed to find more reasons to be near her, their conversations extending beyond construction plans to personal histories and shared jokes. By mid-July, the new store was taking shape, larger and sturdier than before. Beatrice had secured credit from suppliers who respected her husband's reputation and were impressed by her determination. Word had spread about Blackwell's veiled threats, and the town had rallied around her, seeing her stand as symbolic of their own resistance to the outlaw's growing influence. One evening, as a summer storm threatened, Caleb and Beatrice worked late to secure loose materials. The first heavy raindrops were falling as they hurried inside the partially completed building. "We'll have to wait it out," Caleb said, lighting a lantern as thunder rumbled overhead. "Too dangerous to head back to town now." Beatrice nodded, suddenly aware of their isolation. The rain drummed on the new roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Caleb spread his duster on a pile of burlap sacks, offering her a place to sit. "You've never really told me where you were heading before you stopped here," Beatrice said as they settled in the lantern's warm glow. Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Montana, heard there was land available for homesteading. You want to be a farmer?" he smiled. "Rancher, maybe." "Small spread of my own, nothing fancy." "Sounds like you've thought about it a lot. Man gets tired of drifting eventually." His eyes met hers in the dim light. "Starts wanting something permanent." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Beatrice felt her heart quicken as Caleb leaned slightly closer. "Beatrice." A crash of breaking glass interrupted him as a flaming bottle sailed through the window, exploding on the new wooden floor. Caleb reacted instantly, throwing Beatrice to the ground and covering her with his body as flames erupted. "Stay down," he shouted, already moving toward the fire, pulling his coat off to beat at the flames. Beatrice scrambled to her feet, grabbing a bucket of sand they'd been using for mixing mortar. Together they managed to extinguish the fire before it spread, but the message was clear. Blackwell was escalating. In the aftermath, Sheriff Donovan took statements, but with no witnesses in the storm, there was little he could do. "I'll increase patrols," he promised, but Blackwell's careful, never does his own dirty work. When they were alone again, Caleb's expression was grim. "This can't continue. Next time could be worse. What choice do we have? I won't be driven away from my home. We could finish faster, get the store open, show Blackwell and the town that his intimidation won't work." Beatrice nodded slowly. "We'll need more help. I'll speak to some men I trust. Former trail hands who owe me favors." True to his word, within days, Caleb had assembled a small crew of hardworking men, each with their own reasons to dislike Blackwell's growing influence. The work progressed rapidly, and by early August, the new Turner General Store was ready for its grand reopening. The night before, Beatrice found Caleb on the front porch, staring at the stars. She joined him silently, their shoulders almost touching as they leaned against the railing. "Thank you," she said simply. "I couldn't have done this without you. You'd have found a way." His voice was soft in the darkness. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Beatrice." She turned to face him. "Will you stay, after tomorrow, I mean?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want me to?" "Yes." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying at once. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "I've been trying to find reasons to delay heading north. Best reason, just ask me to stay." Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the touch of lips and the shared breath between them. When they parted, Beatrice felt as though something long dormant within her had awakened. "I should go," Caleb whispered, though he made no move to leave. "People will talk." "Let them," Beatrice smiled, feeling reckless and alive. "We're business partners after all. Is that what we are?" His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "For now," she answered. "Tomorrow, who knows?" The reopening of Turner General Store drew the entire town. Beatrice, dressed in her best blue dress, greeted customers while Caleb managed inventory. The celebration was in full swing when Marcus Blackwell arrived with 4 of his men. A hush fell over the crowd as he entered, his cold gaze surveying the store before settling on Beatrice. "Impressive, Mrs. Turner, you've exceeded expectations." His voice carried in the sudden silence. "My offer still stands, double now, seeing the quality of the construction. The store isn't for sale, Mr. Blackwell." Beatrice's voice was steady. "Not now, not ever." Blackwell's smile tightened. "Everything has a price." "Not everything." Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself beside Beatrice. "And not everyone, the drifter speaks." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "Heard you've been playing hero, Xavier. Wondering how long before you move on, like your kind always does." "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb's hand found Beatrice's, their fingers intertwining in a public declaration. Sheriff Donovan pushed through the crowd. "Blackwell, I think you've overstayed your welcome." "Just congratulating Mrs. Turner on her success." Blackwell tipped his hat mockingly. "Always admired a woman with spirit." As he turned to leave, he paused beside Caleb. "Careful, drifter, fire's not the only way to destroy what a man values." The threat hung in the air after they departed, but Beatrice refused to let it dampen the celebration. As the day progressed, she found strength in Caleb's steady presence and the community's support. That night, after the store closed, Caleb insisted on staying to keep watch. Beatrice brought him dinner in the small apartment she'd built above the store. "You can't guard me forever," she said as they sat at her small table. "I know." Caleb looked troubled. "Blackwell won't stop. Men like him can't stand being defied, especially by a woman." "What are you suggesting?" "We need to end this, permanently." Beatrice set down her fork. "How?" Sheriff Donovan received a telegram today. U.S. Marshal is coming, investigating Blackwell for gun running. They need evidence. "And we're going to provide it," Beatrice frowned. "That's dangerous, Caleb." "More dangerous to wait for Blackwell to make his next move." He reached across the table for her hand. "I can't lose you, Beatrice, not when I've just found you." The simplicity of his declaration touched her deeply. "What's the plan?" "Marshal arrives in 3 days." "Blackwell's expecting a shipment tomorrow night at the old mining camp. If we can get proof of the guns and who's buying them. We need to tell Sheriff Donovan. Already have, he's coming with us." "Us?" Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "I'm not staying behind if that's what you're thinking." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue but knew better. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but there was admiration in his eyes. The plan was simple but dangerous. Caleb, Beatrice, and Sheriff Donovan would observe the transaction from hiding, documenting the participants and cargo. 2 deputies would be stationed nearby as backup. As they rode toward the abandoned mining camp the following night, Beatrice felt a strange calm. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the rugged landscape. Caleb rode beside her, his presence reassuring despite the danger ahead. They reached the vantage point above the camp and dismounted, securing their horses out of sight. The abandoned buildings below were dark and silent, but Caleb pointed out fresh tracks in the dirt. "Someone's been here recently," he whispered. "Multiple horses." Sheriff Donovan nodded grimly. "Remember, we observe only, no confrontation unless absolutely necessary." They settled into position, waiting in tense silence. After what seemed like hours, the sound of approaching riders broke the stillness. Beatrice counted 6 men, Blackwell among them, leading pack horses laden with crates. Shortly after, another group arrived from the opposite direction, 3 well-dressed men with the bearing of wealthy ranchers or businessmen. The exchange was brief and businesslike. Money changed hands, and crates were opened to reveal rifles and ammunition. "That's Harlan Foster," Sheriff Donovan whispered. "Owns the biggest ranch in the next county, been feuding with homesteaders for years." "We've seen enough," Caleb said as the men below began to load their newly purchased weapons. "Let's get back to the horses." They were almost to their mounts when a shout rang out. One of Blackwell's men had spotted movement, the deputies, moving into position too early. "Run!" Caleb pushed Beatrice toward her horse as gunfire erupted below. They mounted quickly, but as they rode, a bullet caught Sheriff Donovan in the shoulder, nearly unseating him. Caleb grabbed the reins of the sheriff's horse, leading him as they galloped away. Behind them, riders gave chase. Caleb led them on a winding path through rough terrain, finally losing their pursuers in a dense stand of trees. They took shelter in an abandoned trapper's cabin Caleb knew of, tending to the sheriff's wound. "Not too bad," Donovan grimaced as Beatrice cleaned the injury. "Went clean through." "Bad enough," she countered. "You've lost blood." "Deputies will have raised the alarm," Caleb said, keeping watch at the window. "Marshall might arrive early once he hears." "Blackwell will be desperate now," Donovan said. "He knows we've seen Foster and the guns. He'll come for us before we can testify." "Let him come," Caleb's voice was hard. "This ends now." They spent an uneasy night in the cabin. By morning, the sheriff's fever had risen, and Beatrice knew he needed a doctor. "I'll go for help," she insisted when Caleb hesitated to leave them. "Too dangerous. Blackwell's men will be watching the trails." "Then we both go. Sheriff Donovan needs medical attention and we need to warn the marshal." Reluctantly, Caleb agreed. They fashioned a travois for the injured sheriff and set out at dawn, taking a rarely used trail Caleb remembered from his earlier travels. They were halfway to town when riders appeared on the ridge above them. Blackwell and 3 men, cutting off their path. "Keep going," Caleb said, drawing his revolver. "I'll hold them off." "No," Beatrice's voice was firm. "We stay together." Before they could argue further, shots rang out from behind them. 2 riders in U.S. Marshal badges appeared, providing covering fire. "The deputies got through," Sheriff Donovan said weakly. Marshal Johnson arrived early. What followed was a brief but intense exchange of gunfire. When it ended, one of Blackwell's men was dead, another wounded. Blackwell himself and the 3rd man had fled, but the marshal's posse was in pursuit. "They won't get far," Marshal Johnson assured them as they continued to town. "We've got men stationed at every pass and river crossing." 2 days later, word came that Blackwell had been captured trying to cross into Colorado Territory. The evidence against him, the weapons, witness testimonies, and Harlan Foster's cooperation in exchange for leniency ensured he would face federal charges. As summer faded into autumn, Silver Creek began to recover from Blackwell's shadow. Turner General Store thrived under Beatrice's management, with Caleb a steady presence at her side. Their partnership, both professional and personal, became the subject of town gossip, but neither paid it much mind. On a crisp October evening, Caleb took Beatrice for a ride to the bluff overlooking the valley. As the setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, he asked her to be his wife. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said, holding her hands in his, "but I love you, Beatrice. I think I have since that first morning when you stood in the ashes and refused to give up." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I have nothing to offer but myself, Caleb," he smiled, echoing words spoken months before. "You have me. That's all I've ever wanted." Their wedding was held in November, a simple ceremony attended by the whole town. Sheriff Donovan, recovered from his wound, gave the bride away. As winter settled over Silver Creek, Beatrice and Caleb began planning the expansion of their business, a small lumber mill to complement the store, providing materials for the growing town. They converted the apartment above the store into a comfortable home filled with books and the furniture Caleb crafted in his spare time. At night, they would sit before the fire, talking of the future children, perhaps, and the small ranch Caleb still dreamed of owning someday. One evening, as snow fell gently outside their window, Beatrice rested her head on Caleb's shoulder, contentment warming her more than the fire. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. "When you rode into Silver Creek that day?" Caleb's arm tightened around her. "No. I was just passing through, remember, looking for something I couldn't name. And now," he kissed her gently, "now I've found it, found you." Spring brought new beginnings. The lumber mill opened successfully, and Beatrice discovered she was expecting their first child. As she stood in the doorway of their thriving store, watching Caleb demonstrate a newly crafted rocking chair to a customer, she marveled at how much had changed in less than a year. From ashes and despair had come love and purpose. From "I have nothing" to "you have me" words that had become the foundation of a life rebuilt, stronger than before. And as Caleb caught her eye across the busy store, his smile lighting something deep within her, Beatrice knew that some losses, painful though they were, made way for unexpected treasures. She had lost a past but gained a future one built on love, partnership, and the courage to begin again.